Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. This is Joe Saponari of CyMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigman of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. For the freshest content, a peek behind the scenes, and more candid conversation about running our businesses, dealing with clients, fixing tough technical issues, and everything else you love about Command Control Power, we invite you to join us on Patreon so you don't miss any of this great content. Go to commandcontrolpower.com and click support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the patron-only shows right in your favorite podcast app. Once again, to join us on Patreon and get the latest patron-only episodes, visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. We hope to see you there, and thanks for listening.
We now join a conversation already in progress.
Eventually somebody does come through.
Yeah, but it's that battle between really forcing their hand and then all of a sudden you really have to take ownership of it. And sometimes it's not a big deal. It's just, moving their mail or something like that. But then if anything should go wrong, even if it's not on your shoulders, they are quick to point the finger of blame. I don't know what I'm talking about because this hasn't happened to me very often, but I feel like it's just bad news to push somebody too hard, even in a gentle way, professional way.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming from. I totally agree. When the phone's ringing and you're just fielding calls and you're almost swatting down the calls, you have the pick of the incoming requests and you can do the best stuff. Or if you're just busy and people are calling and they're asking for help and you're in the position of being responsive to that, it's reactive in a way which is usually not preferred. It lowers the bar quite a bit. It's not booting. I'm stuck. This sucks. And then you help them and then, oh my God, you're my savior. Even if it's still a piece of crap old machine and all you've done is PRAM reset and now the thing boots or whatever, you've saved the day and you didn't set the bar high by chasing them down. You really need to do this. You really need to do this. You really have to do this. If you don't do this, we're not going to work with you next time you call. Finally, they just agree, okay, I'll go ahead with this recommendation, but everything better work perfectly and it better work on the first try. And if I have an issue that's totally unrelated 6 months from now, ever since we did that upgrade or ever since I listened to you, that's how I feel it's going to go. So yeah, I think that's where you're coming from too.
Yeah, they've got to want the work from you. They've got to want to be on your managed service plan, or they have to find a real reason to move to that new mail server. And I just find a lot of clients, like I said, I don't know what it is. I don't think it's seasonal, but I think there's a lot of avoidance, at least in my world.
Yeah, I think a lot of it might have to do with what you said recently about just the economy. I'm hearing more and more people are just this blooming recession that we've got going on. We seem to be anticipating a financial downturn, and maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in some cases, like inflation in general is that way. That may be part of it, where people are, if I ignore this email, I save $500.
Here you go.
And so I'll just do that again and again until eventually, hey, so things are problematic. Remember you said I should sign up for this or that. Would that help? And then they're willing to consider it. But in the meantime, if you're pushing them in this sense, even professionally, like you're saying, it's still just each time, each point of contact, to me, it makes me more concerned that they're going to come back and say, I never should have done this. They would have this feeling that everything needs to be perfect now that I agreed to what you recommended.
Yeah, more perfect with their junky equipment that they still don't want to upgrade.
Yeah, I don't necessarily this term that much, but setting expectation, I think that term does a lot of heavy lifting for some people. But the more you can adjust and set their expectations appropriately, you're almost making their strong recommendation, but also hedging it. Look, this needs to be done anyway. I don't know if this is going to fix these supposed issues that you keep reporting to me, but I do know that you need new hardware. If this is a 6 or 7 year old Mac with entry-level specs, I know you would benefit from a new Mac. I'm not saying it's going to solve this problem, but could solve the problem. And you also need a new Mac regardless. I try to hedge it like that up front. But of course, then it undermines your sales pitch. If you're really trying to make it sound great, some people need to be almost promised the moon before they even consider something. So it's just tough navigating that. It's a classic, it just depends on the person situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always a challenge, too, to find new clients. New clients are the right fit, and they're not knocking down the door, at least in my case. I'm not getting those calls all the time that I'd love to get, and at least entertain the idea of bringing in some new clients. And I don't know. It's always a challenging time to think.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had similar goes hot and cold sometimes with clients. And I had one where I was helping them pretty regularly. They had basically just my point of contact was the admin person, and it was like a very small law firm, and it was the lawyer and the admin. And I was working very closely with the admin over time and just helping them switch from PC to Mac, and all along the way, just mentioning my monthly plan. And then I sent a recommendation back in like June or something finally to the lawyer, CC the admin, no response. And I just have the ticket where I'm recommending it. And then I set it to like pending for some date in the future. Like, I don't really care if they respond right away. I'm not going to sweat it, but I do want to remember to follow up if they don't respond. So that comes up on my radar a month later, and then I maybe email them or maybe just kick it down the road again for another month. And then, okay, now maybe I'll follow up. Tried that like last week, no response. So this was 3 months later, 4 months, whatever. So a week goes by and I'm trying to decide, do I bother to follow up again? So I emailed the admin person directly, not CCing the lawyer. And she said, talk to him, and he said he'll try it for a year. Oh, nice. Okay. So that was easy.
When were you going to tell me, though?
No, I guess what happened was like I followed up saying, hey, do you think it's worth me trying again? Or if he's interested, do you want to schedule a phone call? Just throwing it out there. Maybe if they said, try us back after the busy season, after the holidays, whatever. That was the most positive I could have hoped for.
Yeah.
It's like they took the liberty of mentioning it and getting a verbal yes. So it's worth it in that case. But I could have had them signed up 6 months, 4 or 5, whatever months ago. And I had to wait all this time. And I'm glad it worked out. I could have given up at any point, but it didn't really cost me anything to follow up. And that's just the sign up for the monthly service. But I think some of the other issues are when I think you'd benefit from this new hardware. I think you'd benefit from migrating your email, whatever. And you follow up with that. And it's like you're saying, it gets frustrating to just keep following up. But in some cases, they will go through. And in other cases, at least the recommendation is on record. I can resurrect this old email thread from 2 years ago where I said, for this reason, you should do this. And you're calling me back and everything's a mess. And I'm not surprised it's a mess because you didn't do what I suggested the last time. And now I'm going to suggest that again, or now we're going to have to work around it like this. But at least you have the recommendation on file and you can literally resurrect an old email thread. And sometimes you passively just include that context in your reply where it's just there for the record. I don't know. So at least you have that worst case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes when you sign somebody on and they've either got new equipment or not so new equipment, a lot of our services are, to overuse an overused word, our MSP stack is very transparent. The client may occasionally see a pop-up from Adigi asking them to restart or something like that, but a lot of what we do is pretty silent. And sometimes they're expecting some sort of a wow factor and they're not really getting it. That's a kind of an interesting thing too. But once you've got them, I think, on your plan, it's really difficult for them to make a break because they feel maybe if I stop this service, maybe that's going to be a mistake. Maybe I'm being foolish here.
Exactly.
I don't know. I think that plays into the psychology of the client, whether it's a residential user or a business user, just to maintain status quo. So once you got them on the hook, I think that's a great position to be in.
Yeah. I was thinking about that recently too. Should I just be spending a lot more of my effort on getting clients to sign up? Because like you're saying, once you've got them, it's very rare that we have somebody jump ship. It actually happened last week. I got one of these emails where there no harm, no foul. It was, hey, and again, I think it was like in the broader economy was the context. Hey, things seem to be working better than when this is ironic. You're doing a great job, so we're going to quit. Things would be working better than when we first signed up. And so we don't seem to really need much help with the Macs. So everybody just does their own thing. It's really true in this case. I see Macs sometimes that are just like offline for extended periods of time and they're not even using. I just don't even know what they do. I think they don't work on their computers as much as most clients do. I think that their job is like in the field a lot and stuff like that. So that's fine. So they're like, we don't really use the Macs as much and they seem to be working fine and we don't really need your help as much and this and that. And like for whatever the reasons they gave, we don't want to sign up for your monthly, we want to cancel our monthly plan. It was as neutral as possible. It was not trying to burn any bridges and we're still going to call you and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with that, really. I might just say, oh, you can try this monitoring only plan or something. And again, we can speak to the wisdom of whether we should, as consultants, offer more of an entry-level plan. Maybe it's a case-by-case thing, but that might be a follow-up that I do at some point in the future. Their plan also includes network maintenance. So I do the updates and the maintenance on the unified network on a regular basis, and they're basically including that in their monthly plan. Actually, I can't remember if they're paying in the plan monthly or if we're charging them. But I said to them, you may follow up regularly when needed to update or maintain the network or the server. They also have a server. So the question came to mind, should I argue? And this kind of speaks more broadly when a client declines a recommendation or ignores a recommendation, and maybe the recommendation is the monthly plan. Do you engage with a client that just doesn't play ball, that doesn't want to sign up, that wants to do things the hard way, basically? Is that worth it for us to sign a new client if they don't sign up for a monthly plan? Not even sign a client, just be willing to help with whatever their needs are. Or do we require that for all new clients? Residential is a different story. Is it worth just drawing a hard boundary, and maybe they would be more inclined to say yes if they knew that's their only option? We really want to work with you guys. You seem great. And if we give them the option, you can work with us, we're great. Or you can work with us, we're great, and you pay us monthly. If you haven't made a good sales pitch on what's included with the monthly plan, they may not go ahead with that. And from their perspective, they may be, what's the downside?
It cuts both ways. If they're on your plan, they're saving money with any charges above and beyond. However, if they're on a pay-as-you-go with you, time and materials, you make them pay for it. You know, that number is $225 an hour, $325 an hour. It's not that outrageous. You want a better rate? Either find somebody else or sign up with our plan. You wouldn't say that to them directly. So I would take on a business client with time and materials. We have a legal firm. We've done a number of things for them. We put in a Synology server. We set them up with a Meraki system. We moved their mail to Microsoft as their email host provider. The guy still pushes back. He doesn't want to do any kind of managed service. He just rolls along.
Yeah, so why fight it? Why waste your effort? You can tell sometimes this is just not someone that's going to sign up for that. And therefore, why turn away their money? They're not going to get the benefit. They're going to be a little bit less efficient to work with, and therefore we charge more. And it's a good point. And why we charge more, or why we discount heavily when they do have a plan, why we charge more as the entry level price. And if they sign up, they get a massive discount. I try to demonstrate more value too. I had one recently, monthly subscriber client who doesn't really need that much, but often will call us for issues that are like how to do something, some training. It's nice to work with clients like that sometimes.
Sure.
And this time, I think the call was less than 6 minutes. I made an invoice because there was already a ticket. And I just wrote on there courtesy. I forget what I put on, courtesy call or something like that. And I just charged 0 as opposed to 15 minutes. And so the invoice will be sent out. And hopefully she'll notice that there was a $0 invoice and it was a courtesy. But whether she notices or not, some people would argue you probably should email the person and say, hey, by the way, that was on me, whatever. But even if she doesn't notice, and if someday she's, what's the value of this thing? I can point to it and say, look, this was a courtesy call because it was just a few minutes, and glad to be able to help. I'm glad you call us when you have questions. So it's good to demonstrate value in that way. And that's, like you said, if they're not going to play ball, then they just get charged for every minute, basically, and they get charged the higher rate.
So on a recent episode, I talked about an end user at a client who was aggravating me, and aggravating in a way where very unappreciative of the assistance that we were trying to offer, and then being argumentative on who was right about the technical aspects of what we were trying to offer. So it was very frustrating overall. I know I mentioned this, but just to catch people up to speed, it was just one of those things where instead of, when I asked some leading questions as to how to help him better, instead of offering those questions, he would just argue any of my initial comments about how we can make it better. And I was just like, I don't understand.
Can you give an example of that, the pushback?
Yeah, he had mentioned it was to do with security and privacy and allowing recording and stuff. And we briefly talked about this on that episode, but basically arguing when I had said to check something out in order to allow screen recording, because we had to allow standard users to turn on screen recording, he was arguing about what that was and where it should be, and that also saying that camera was disabled by default. It's not. You can say what you will. I'm just trying to help you in the right direction. And it was just back and forth.
Yeah.
Just I don't know.
I feel like I know this story intimately because I just edited the show. So this client of Sam's, he's a worker bee, but he's not at the bottom of the food chain. You said he's a little bit higher up.
Exactly.
But he's not at the top.
No, he's not executive level, but they have multiple locations and he's one of the leaders at that branch.
So you have to be a little bit careful how you tread, but it sounds like things really escalated.
You always want to be cautious, but I think we've all talked about this to some degree, but keep our level of self-respect involved.
Sure.
Where it's like, okay, I'll tread carefully amongst a site leader, but if they're going to start coming after me, and this could be my curmudgeon ways these days, I don't know, but if they're going to attack my knowledge instead of working collaboratively with me, I'm just not going to stand for that. It was a Saturday to start it off with, and I was just being kind in replying on Saturday. Because,
and you were at your dad's.
Right. Yeah, you remember, you really did just recently edit this show. I was all sorts of hot under the collar because, again, he started the initial email chain by being aggravated at us at needing admin rights. So I was like, take that up internally. That's not my call. This was about a week ago, and I literally reached out to him via the ticket first thing Monday morning, Tuesday morning, and Thursday morning because he was so in need. Right. And he replies on like Friday saying, this is what I need you to do. And I was like, all right, dude. I'm like, okay, listen, let's do a remote session. You finally replied to me. Let's do a remote session. I don't hear anything. So get this. The following Saturday, so that was the reply I gave him Friday morning. So he had the entire business day after a week of me trying. Saturday comes around and he emails me and says, I've missed an important deadline because HCS couldn't resolve my issue in time. That
is a load of crap. Wow.
Dude, I was steaming. I was so mad it like ruined my Saturday. And my wife was like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I just can't describe it right now. I'm too angry. And she's like, all right, you need to chill out. And so I go upstairs. I'm like writing a few different versions of my reply to him. As Jerry said, treading carefully, but also preserving my integrity.
Did you kick the dog? That usually helps.
No, God, no. So I reply, but waited till Monday morning. So I'm like, I'm not even going to give him the decency to show him that I'm answering on the weekend. So Monday morning comes along and I had a reply ready to go. I just prepared it over the weekend. And essentially, to boil it down, I had said, you reached out to me on Saturday again, but I felt the need to clarify something before we can move further. And I said, and I laid it out exactly. And I copied important people involved. And I said, I reached out to you Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. You decided to reply on Friday, and I offered for remote support. You didn't reply till Saturday and said this was our fault. This is simply inaccurate. I'm here to help. I said it again. I'm going to be on site today because I was going there Monday.
Wow.
And I'm happy to work with you directly. No response.
Wow.
Right. So I get in on Monday to the office and I'm like preparing for a little mini war.
Yeah.
And my contact there, who I'm friendly with, she's very nice. She meets me and we had some other stuff to do. So where is he? And she goes, you won't believe this. I didn't even know this. She said, he's on paternity leave. He's not even in the office. Wait, what? And so he was trying to work from home apparently, but didn't even give me the decency to tell me I'm not going to be there if you're coming on site for me today. So I was just done at this point. She was kind enough to raise my email to her bosses and say that he's acting inappropriately. They did everything they could to help. So thankfully, the company themselves were completely on our side. And I'm thankful for that, because if that hadn't been the case, we would have had issues. I know he's your employee, but you got to back us up here. So anyway, long story short is that's where we are now. And I decided not to help him remotely. I asked Matt, I'm like, you need to step in if he needs help, because if I have to talk to him, I think we're going to have words. Of course, he didn't reply to Matt either. So he's still not helped. He's still not resolved as of 9 days since the initial request.
That's completely ridiculous, obviously.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, there's a paper trail. It's like email has a timestamp. I'm sure you have it on record of what the policy is. And I'm sure that his boss understands you're not necessarily available on a Saturday, and yet you were available on that first Saturday. Yeah. You proactively followed up, but most people wouldn't even bother, especially with the way he approached you. That's his freaking problem at that point. You did him above and beyond the decency to follow up repeatedly to try to make sure he's taken care of, and also that just you want it off your radar. And he's just sitting there like ignoring everything and missing a deadline. That's just bull.
What I don't understand is why his
yeah.
nose is so out of joint about
Yeah.
ACS. Like, where is that axe grinding coming from?
It stems from his level of self-importance and the fact that he's not an administrator on his computer, which really angers him, apparently. So he feels like he needs admin rights, and it's company policy. Nobody has them. We have ways of getting you what you need. And sure, sometimes I'm sure it can be frustrating if someone's, hey, I need an app, and we have to go through a process. I totally get that. Don't get me wrong. But it's the policy of the organization. And we make it as efficient as we can. We're pretty quick about making things available if it's not already in their self-service portal, which we try and make it. But that's it, Jerry. He just has an air of such self-importance that I should have these level rights, even though nobody else does. I should. And that's.
Can you share with us what kind of a business it is? Just to set the table?
Yeah,
they don't sell Bitcoin, do they, Sam?
No. They're in healthcare. They do something with healthcare.
Okay. All right. So this isn't some high finance guy, and he's Gordon Gekko. That's the way he rolls down the highway.
Gordon Gekko, nice. A Wall Street reference for those that don't know it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting assessment you've made, where it's his level of perceived self-importance that I should be root. Like you said, there's a channel for that. If you want to get into it, you could advise his boss. He should not be admin. This is why we have this policy, and these are the reasons why we don't let end users be admins. And he could make the appeal like, blah, 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 I've been here a long time and this and that, and I should be admin because it'll make it easier. And sometimes I work on the weekend and whatever. Okay. And you could have that conversation through that channel, but to be stuck up about it in an email to you and there's just basically try to build a really poorly laid out case over the course of a week of non-responses, why he should be admin. It's just such a weird way to go about it. And it's just silly. But I think that makes sense that he would think if there's such a thing as an admin, I should be an admin. It also reminds me of this topic of shadow IT, though, because my next thought was, just go buy a Mac. If you think you're so important, you need to be the admin of the computer, which, by the way, Apple's taking away more and more of our capability to do anything we want on a computer, which is a whole other argument. But even Apple has limits. You can't just modify everything yourself. So anyway, but if you buy a computer, you can be an admin. What would happen in this case? I don't know how much you want to reveal about policies and whatever that are in place, but there's ways of stopping that. There's ways of stopping him from accessing company resources on a private computer that he buys. And then that brings up the concept of shadow IT, where people BYO Mac into an organization that otherwise provides one with certain policies in place, but you bring your own and you don't have those policies in place. And you route around that issue. That's something you've accounted for in this particular client case?
Like being able to preventing the access from a personal computer?
Yeah, which by the way is not always easy to do. It could be like Azure conditional access policies. Is that a thing?
Yeah, you're getting into some territory that we've been exploring for them, actually. It was one of those things where they wanted to know all of the security things that could be done. Okay, I created a whole proposal around that stuff to say, sure, we can lock all this stuff down, but the minute, to your point, Joe, someone buys a Mac, any computer, and connects to SharePoint with their credentials, they're in. They can do what they want. And I made that mention to them, that's your weakest link right there. If you really want to be secure, there are compliance policies. And so that's actually in the works, to be honest with you, because they really want to get to that space, which again leads to some difficulties. If they're already checking email on a personal device, that will stop working for them. There's all these things. I'm like, you guys have to be aware. I don't disagree that for your security aspects of what you want to do. I'm just saying, just be aware there's going to be some pain points, and it's going to suck for some people at first. And so I'm just warning you right now.
Yeah, because you can't necessarily even account for all of that. I guess you could audit some logs and figure out who's accessing what from where, how much time you're going to spend on that versus just dealing with the fallout, which is, it turns out somebody had some old Android tablet and that doesn't qualify anymore. And so now they're stuck and they have to, whatever, you have to deal with it. But the alternative, the opposite approach is basically just the light touch kind of management where you have policies and things, but you don't necessarily block everything. And this is where I'll bring up Kolide again. I think it's really worth knowing about this option because it's a completely different approach where you just inform users and you don't have to do it manually. Their software would inform the users via Slack and it would say, this is what we recommend you change. This is what we recommend you do. It can work in conjunction with enforced policies as well. You still may want to limit access to corporate email to, certain either corporate-owned devices or devices with certain policies or whatever. This is something that can work in conjunction with that without limiting users so much. Like you let users run as an admin, you let them make changes to their own system, but you advise them if something goes out of compliance or if they have an issue. Hey, your 1Password emergency kit is sitting on your desktop. Let's go ahead and delete that. Here's how you do it. It's easy. And then they take care of it. And the user is probably thankful that Kolide, that your software, advise them to take care of that, because now they realize, wow, that would have been an issue. That could have been an issue. And they're empowered to deal with it themselves rather than having IT come in and enforce policies. So it's just an interesting approach, the opposite of what you're describing, where you want to limit everything as much as possible.
Because it is healthcare, and talking about BYOD, is SharePoint, first of all, are they HIPAA compliant? If somebody does BYOD, what do you do?
You could do user enrollment with a policy, right?
Yeah, Joe, there are a few things I want to talk about in regards to Kolide, because I enrolled my own computer in testing it, and I was fascinated by the simplicity of it, but also where it showed the issues were. And I had legit issues on my computer too.
Yeah.
But to round out the conversation with this particular customer, there is one other thing that I was exploring, and it's something by Rich Troughton, who's just an incredible contributor to the community. But he developed on GitHub SAP Privileges, which is a great little tool. I think Charles Edge had developed Make Me an Admin, where basically you can allow a user to be an administrator for a given amount of time, or allow them to turn on that feature. Like if admin rights isn't so much about blocking people from doing anything nefarious, but just protecting the computer, then you could allow admin rights for a short amount of time, allow them to do something and then turn it off. And that's something like we've explored for the site leaders at this particular company. I just don't want to tell him I'm looking at it for him, because I don't want to give him the satisfaction.
Can I throw something in here too? I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's a great idea. I didn't even think of that in relation to this, but there are other tools. Ross Matsuda, I don't know, think I've mentioned his site before, sudoaid.com. Have you guys seen this? It's a fantastic resource, especially for people using Adigy. So it's sudoade.com. Think of the word lemonade, but sudoaid. He's a great contributor in the Adigy Slack channel on Mac Admin Slack, and he's the one who developed the AppleScript GUI kind of like methodology to open the software updates panel to the other updates are available prompt. So you skip the freaking banner for Monterey or now Ventura, which is great. And yeah, so his scripts and just guidance has been really useful. But he mentioned having a script in Adigy where it, just like you said, the user can request to be an admin for a short period of time. And they are, I think in his case, it also asks them for reason. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. It's like they have to specify a reason. Not that like you're going to stop them if it's a bad reason, they just have to put it in. So it's like there's a reason, there's like an audit trail of why they're doing this. And then also it logs a ticket. So every time they elevate to admin for whatever their specified reason is, you get a ticket so that there's some kind of paper trail of this happening. I thought that was a really interesting way to handle this.
I love this. This is actually interesting because this is specific to working within Adigy for this. So it's kind of like built for that. That's
exactly
great.
Yeah, it's awesome. There's tons of great stuff on it on sudoaid. So yeah, huge thanks to Ross and all your contributions to the whole Slack channel for Adigy. And this site is just really useful. So I encourage people to go to sudoaid.com and subscribe too, so you can get updates.
Great tip, Joe. I think I'll probably be checking it out. But I had typed up some angry notes about this incident. And then as of yesterday morning, hearing that the company was on my side, I calmed down a little bit about it because I was very upset, and felt like insulted. And then I was like, okay, this client actually is looking out for me in that respect. So that's the positive I'd say out of all this. Not all clients are bad, even though I like to bitch about all of them.
Nice. That's really awesome that they had your back. It's really reassuring to know that this squeaky wheel can't get the best of you. And also then if everything like blows over, you can go back to them and you can say, by the way, I was thinking about this, and to preempt any more issues, I actually have a solution that I think everyone can be happy with. It's nice that they had your back there and that it's not going to be just like, do whatever he says. He's your new boss. That would not be good.
Yeah, we would have had words.
So going back to Kolide, I just wanted to also mention this new feature. It reminds me a lot of this kind of powerful feature of Watchman monitoring. I've mentioned in the past, like Kolide's dashboard reminded me of a prettier version of Watchman monitoring's dashboard. I really like their just design of how they communicate issues and status to you and stuff. And so again, another comparison to Watchman. Watchman has the concept of plugins, and obviously like a lot of the built-in ones are pretty useful as far as just the basic stuff, like if it detects malware, what the status of that's considered a plugin, what the capacity is and the space used on the disk, that's a plugin, and any number of different things are plugins. Backblaze status, if you use Backblaze and Time Machine. And then you can have like third-party plugins. You can have additional plugins added to that. But that's never been particularly easy to get into and write your own and that kind of thing. And of course, then another comparison I'd make is Adigy has custom facts. And that's a little bit, from my perspective, easier to get involved in. You can write a script basically that runs on your devices that either reads the status of a log file or just any number of different things and reports back, like it just echoes or outputs either like a true false or a number. It could be a version number, it could be a status like up to date or not up to date or whatever. So you can do a lot of that with these built-in features of these tools that we use. For example, in Adigy, it's really useful too, because you can, if it's a Boolean output like true false, you can show the status as just like a green dot in a column. So it can give you that kind of pretty interface. With Kolide, the new feature is custom device checks. So a device check is, again, it's analogous to me to custom device fact or a plugin status in Watchman monitoring, custom device fact in Adigy. So Kolide has a device check, and there's tons and tons of them built in. But now the new thing is you can write your own, and they've made it really easy to do things yourself. In the case of Kolide, they also can deal with like remediation. So in other words, like guiding users into how to remediate the issue, what to communicate users about, like why this device check that you've written for them is an issue. So it's a really powerful thing that you can leverage for really customized workflows for your clients to solve real issues in the field. And I think the other kind of side benefit to something like this is it also fosters more lock-in with your end users in just like a really natural way. It's not like any kind of false, like forced lock-in. It's if you include something that's super customized for your client, it makes them even less likely to leave your services because you're doing this extra fancy stuff that they can't just take with them when they leave. So I think this is a really powerful feature. To find out more about Kolide in general, this helps us out if you use our link. So it's kolide.com/CCP, KOLIDE.com/CCP. And again, I just think this is a really, interesting take on all of this stuff, policies, security, with users, how you think about your end users and your clients. So definitely check out kolide.com/CCP. And one more plug for honest.security, just to read as a philosophical piece to reflect on. But yeah, Kolide, some great new features and great support of the show. So thank you.
I'll give you some of my personal experience with it as well, because I had a chance to play around with it a few weeks ago and install it on my work/personal Mac. First off is the verbiage that's shown to the user if they install it on their own. Just a little bit of peace of mind for the end user, saying, hey, this is not being used to spy on you. It's not going to collect information about web pages. Like you see profile on your computer, MDM profile, you're not sure what that does. It shows that the person in control can erase your computer and do all this stuff. That could be scary to an end user. This is very much showing you, hey, we're looking at this from a security aspect, but you're in control. And I like that aspect of it. And then second to that, when I installed it, I found a bunch of security issues that I forgot about on my own computer. So I was looking around, I had some checks that failed. And sometimes you do things on your computer for testing. I had enabled SSH remote login. I had turned on file sharing because I was doing some tests in a mini network on here, and I never turned them off. So I was like, oh, look at that. I was totally surprised. It was one of those situations where on my own computer, I had some things that I wouldn't normally want to keep on.
Did you have the printer sharing button checked?
Yeah, that's right. For my USB printer in the office.
Nice. Yeah, everybody has that checked. That's the first thing to do before they call you, is they go there and they check that box. As like your clients with printer issues, they go in there and they check that box. Yeah, no, that's such a great point, Sam. It's just useful even just to detect your own problems in Kolide. So I guess I'm supposed to say, you go to that link that I mentioned, kolide.com, KOLIDE.com/CCP. And you can actually just start a trial and get a goodie bag of free stuff from Kolide. Why not give it a try? Put it on your own machine. Check out the issues that are being reported to you. Come on, a lot of us are already in Slack for the Mac admin Slack, which is such a great resource. And it will communicate with you those issues. Or you can just look on the dashboard in Kolide and see what the issues are on your own system and then remediate them. And while you're in there trying it out, why not test out some of these custom device checks? You can do things, some of the examples, that you can locate sensitive files on a device. So you can just literally do a Spotlight query for whatever you would search for in Spotlight to locate a sensitive file that you want to tell somebody not to keep on their Mac. You can require certain apps be installed on the system and running. You can prohibit certain apps. So you can do all that stuff with custom device checks. And I just think it's a really, as much as it is a light touch thing like you're describing, where it's like less intimidating for an end user to agree to install, it's also very powerful. Yeah, it's a cool thing to know about. So I'm not sure when this will air, but it's the day after Halloween here, and as we record. So I just wanted to say happy Halloween, or as my calendar notifications say, Halloween tomorrow, Halloween tomorrow, Halloween tomorrow, Halloween tomorrow.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple expertise right now. Right now. My Mac is slow. Have you tried restarting? Well, the fans won't blow. Have you tried restarting? But my data is gone. Have you tried restarting? I dropped it